Rhaenys, the youngest of the three Targaryens, was all her sister was not: playful, curious, impulsive, given to flights of fancy. No true warrior, Rhaenys loved music, dancing and poetry, and supported many singers, mummers and puppeteers. Yet it was said Rhaenys spent more time on Dragonback than her brother and sister combined. For above all, she loved to fly. Fire and Blood, Aegon's Conquest. Technically speaking, officially, there has never been a ruling queen of the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros. There are some women who pushed claims, some who were passed over, and some who fought wars for their rights, but still ended up defeated. But when we are looking at the list of official monarchs of the Seven Kingdoms, there has only ever been kings. Most women who had the title of queen did so as a consort to the ruling king. Strictly speaking, this is the case with the two sister wives of Aegon the Conqueror, Visenya and Rhaenys Targaryen. But both Visenya and Rhaenys were so much more than your average queen consorts. In many ways, they were almost equal partners in the conquest and rule of Westeros. These two women were trusted by Aegon implicitly, and given more freedom to rule than any other queen Westeros has ever seen, save for maybe Good Queen Alysanne, whom too had a significant influence, and the ear of her brother and king, Jaehaerys the Conciliator. Visenya and Rhaenys were part of council meetings. They held their own courts in the king's place, and gave judgment over issues brought to them. They even had enough influence and respect from Aegon to negotiate political matters and suggest changes and additions to law. Aegon, Visenya and Rhaenys are known in the history books as the three heads of the dragon, because this very much reflects the personal and working relationship they had. It was said by some, Aegon wed Visenya out of duty, and Rhaenys out of desire and love. Fire and Blood, Aegon's Conquest. It's often said that Queen Rhaenys was a great patron to bards, singers, mummers and puppeteers of the Seven Kingdoms, showering them with gold and gifts on those who pleased her. The early days after the conquest, in the smoky hall of the Aegon fort, there was always the hum of some tune or ballad. Her sister Visenya did not share her younger sibling's love of the arts. In fact, she is said to have found Rhaenys' patronage frivolous and a waste of gold. But Rhaenys correctly saw that there was wisdom in the power of music and poetry that went beyond a simple love of art. It could indeed be a vital political tool if used correctly. A tool, if not used by House Targaryen, could just as easily be used by their foes against them. In the early years of Aegon's reign, the singers and bards proved more than eager and willing to win the favour of Queen Rhaenys, and composed many songs and tunes in praise of House Targaryen and King Aegon himself. In time, these songs passed from singer to singer, and went forth into the world as they were performed and sang in every keep, castle, village green, tavern, brothel and campfire in the Seven Kingdoms, from the most southern part of House Targaryen's dominion in the Dornish Marches to the cold and bleak wall in the distant north. Thus, tales of Aegon, Visenya and Rhaenys would become legend, and the three heads of the dragon beloved by even the most simple of smallfolk in the most isolated part of the kingdom. Aegon was no longer just the conqueror, but Aegon the Dragon, the hero king of Westeros, whom sat upon his iron throne bringing peace and justice to all. When Queen Visenya placed a Valyrian steel circlet studded with rubies on her brother's head, and Queen Rhaenys held him as Aegon, first of his name, king of all of Westeros and shield of his people, the dragons roared and the lords and knights sent up a cheer. Fire and Blood, Aegon's Conquest. Out of the three heads of the dragon, it seems Rhaenys was the most beloved by the smallfolk, and if accounts from this time are to be believed, she too loved and took great interest in them. She was known to have had a special love for the women and children of the realm. There was one occasion when Aegon and Visenya were on a royal progress that Rhaenys was left to sit the Iron Throne and rule the realm in her brother's place. One day, she was holding court in the Aegon fort's cavernous throne room, thick with smoke from the fires. A man was brought before her, accused of beating his young wife to death. The brothers of the woman wanted him to be punished for his crimes, but the husband argued that it was his lawful right to beat and kill his wife, as he had discovered her in bed with another man. Lawfully speaking, the husband had the right of it. The law in most of the Seven Kingdoms before the Conquest was well established, with the exception of Dorne, who had always been well ahead of its neighbours when it came to the rights of women. By law, this husband did have the right to chastise his erring wife. The husband also pointed out that the iron rod he had used to beat his wife was no thicker than his thumb, which was too clearly defined by ancient laws. He even went as far as bringing the very rod in question to court with him as proof. But no ancient law, however, was going to satisfy Rhaenys Targaryen. She'd asked the man coldly how many times he had indeed struck his wife, but the husband could not find an answer. The dead woman's brothers claimed, however, it was at least 100 blows. Queen Rhaenys took some time to consult with her maester, then a septon, before rendering her judgment. As an adulterous wife gave offence to the seven, who created women to be faithful and obedient to their husbands, and therefore should be chastised. For a brief moment, it is said the husband had believed he had won the argument. But Rhaenys continued. She decreed that as God had 7 faces, the punishment should only consist of 6 blows, with the 7th reserved only for the stranger, as the stranger is the face of death. Therefore, the first 6 blows had been technically lawful, but the other 94 had been an affront to gods and men, and must be in turn punished in kind. From that day on, the rule of 6 became a part of Westerosi common law, next to the rule of thumb, which established the legal width of a rod that can be used to beat the wanton wife. The accused husband was taken away from the Aegon fort to the foot of the Hill of Rhaenys, where the dead wife's brothers dispensed 94 blows using a rod of lawful size. Some say even the very same rod he'd used to beat his wife. Strangely, this tale does not say if this husband survived his punishment. While Rhaenys' rule of 6 was not as progressive as, say, in Dorne, it was a huge step forward for the rights of women in Westeros. Some do question, given Rhaenys' apparent love for women, why she did not outlaw the chastisement of wanton wives and women altogether. The truth is, during these early days of Aegon's rule of Westeros, each kingdom was still very much seen as individual. Uprooting the very foundation of these ancient laws would have likely have caused much resentment from the men in power across the realm, resentment that could fuel uprising. Even half a decade later, when Queen Alysanne convinced King Jaehaerys to repeal the right to the first night, an ancient tradition that allowed a lord to claim the first night of a bride at their wedding, it was met with much hostility and resentment, especially in the north, where this tradition was most popular. The difference is, by this time Westeros itself was much more stable, and House Targaryen's power not even remotely in question. Thus they were able to make this huge change to the rights of lords. The rule of 6 was a compromise of Rhaenys' goals, but a necessary one that created the first step on future improvements to the rights of women in Westeros. It paved the way for the good work of women such as Good Queen Alysanne. It is believed this is only one such tale of many similar tales like this, where Rhaenys fundamentally changed the way law was dispensed in Westeros, slowly and gradually improving the rights of the small folk, and especially women, throughout her whole life.